Hello, this is Dr. Marky Royster. Thank you for joining me on this three-part session of leadership behavior. We will journey into some of the nuances of leadership that can propel you rather than derail you. Let's begin. First thing that I want you to know, and this is what you need to know up front, is understanding leadership. Leaders must know and certainly have a distinction in their behavior that is commensurate with what they expect and demand of others. Thus, leaders must especially be aware of the actions, reactions, and decisions which can propel or derail them. Otherwise, what would be a joyful and honorable tenure would be fraught with confusion, contempt, and corruption, and even character assassinations. So two things here I want to point out. Your actions and your reactions. Your actions to the decision-making process and your reactions to the decision-making process, especially when it comes to others. So what is often at issue? Well, a few things here. One is lifestyle choices, the decisions that you make with your lifestyle that can be a problem when it comes to your behavior. Another one is unbecoming activity. That can be problematic or it can be good. But we all know when it says unbecoming, that's just what it means, unbecoming behavior. The third thing is inappropriate relationships, connecting with the wrong people, having partnerships with the wrong people can derail a person. Also, a lack of accountability, not being accountable to anyone can cause a person to derail. But there's more. So let's talk about behavior and the importance of it. It's not always in what you say, but it is often in what you do. So let your actions be above reproach as a leader. You want your actions to be above reproach. So what do we mean by this? Followers may not always do what you say, but they will certainly watch what you do. So as a leader, with your behavior, you want to make sure that your actions are above reproach. Next, we have avoid public notoriety. Avoid public notoriety. So notice what the Apostle Paul said in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 3 and 4. He says, we give no offense in anything, that our ministry may not be blamed, but in all things we commend ourselves as ministers of God in such patience, in tribulations, in needs, in distress. Now, in a Christian setting or in a spiritual setting, that might be easy to do, but sometimes it can be a challenge. You want to avoid public notoriety. Take this lesson from the Apostle Paul. Also, we have receive and reciprocate goodwill. It is imperative that a leader knows how to receive goodwill from others. Everybody is not out to challenge you. Everybody is not out to harm you or to derail you or to undermine you. It is important to know how to receive goodwill, especially if you are a new leader. People want to extend goodwill to you. Congratulations, they want to be helpful. But if you do not know how to receive goodwill, that can be problematic, especially down the road when you will need goodwill from others. But not just receiving goodwill, but knowing how to reciprocate it. Giving goodwill to others is a very important piece to this. So we also want to understand this. The Apostle Paul, again, talking to the church there in Galatia, he says this, let us do good to all, especially to those who are of the household of faith. Now, keep in mind, what you do in part often reflects and directly or indirectly impact the whole. We learn a lesson from the terrible tragedy there in the book of Joshua chapter 6 and 7, the story of Ai. Learn that lesson. It is very important. Now, let's get into some of the nuances of leadership. We have identifying markers, okay? Identifying markers, the markers of leadership attraction. These are the markers of leadership attraction. This was done based on a case study done about 5, 6, 7 years ago. And here is what this case study revealed. It revealed that there are 5 identifying markers that people are attracted to in a leader. Number 1, starting from the right side, we have personal engagement. Personal engagement, and we're going to cover all of these in just a moment individually. Discipleship. People like personal engagement. People like a ministry that does discipleship. People tend to like where there is inclusion. People like or have a tendency to appreciate evangelism. People have a liking for transparency. Now, on the other side, in the private or the public sector, is really almost the same thing. Because in the public sector, in the private sector, there is a corporate culture of camaraderie. They want people to come to get along and enjoy and share knowledge and work well together. Training and development, equal opportunity, talent acquisition, and shared knowledge. Now, if you look at both sides, it seems like both sides basically want the same thing. And this is where we have in the middle here, a culture of camaraderie, whether it's on a secular job or whether it's in the church. We want people to get along and enjoy the differences. The second one is coaching and training. The ministry would call it discipleship. Training and development would be called in the public sector or the private sector. A diversified voice, equal opportunity, inclusivity, growth and expansion, and then finally openness. These are the things that a private sector or public sector employer wants, but also what a ministry desires. So let's look at these individually. So we have these 5 things. It comes down to 5 things that people really enjoy seeing. Let's talk about personal engagement first of all. When we talk about personal engagement, we're talking about being approachable. Being approachable. You want to win the confidence of individuals, and you want to show interest. So why be approachable? Regardless of the dynamics of an organization, people want their leader to be personable and approachable, not standoffish, not aloof, but approachable. Win confidence. Leaders who does not or do not have the confidence of his or her followers will find it difficult to achieve his or her objective. If you do not have the confidence of your followers, you will end up losing and not being able to achieve the goals and objectives, let alone stay true to the mission statement. Show interest as a leader. Show interest. Leaders must show an interest in followers as much as followers diligently show an interest in them, in enhancing the organizational posture and its leaders. So now let's move on to the second one. Inclusivity. Inclusion. Inclusionary leadership behavior. Now, let's talk about this first one here. You want to be purposeful in including individuals into a plan, a process, or a group. You want to include them regardless, look at me for a moment, regardless of their physical attributes or any distinguishing markers. You want to be inclusive. because you never know if that person that you include, along with another person, will be the brain trust to create the idea that will propel you to the next level. They may be that brain trust that will help you move forward. We talk about inclusion. Allow individuals or groups to have a sense of belonging and a say in a larger group without feeling alienated. You don't want them to feel alienated, or you certainly don't want them to lose their core values and identity. This is why you want the inclusion. Come in, feel free to share your ideas. Come in and collaborate. Come in and have a meeting of the minds. This is why we bring you in, the best and the brightest. Now, inclusionary, one must be open enough to allow for disagreement, but savvy enough to bring harmony to various factions when necessary. So what does this do or have to do with leadership behavior? A leader must conceptualize strategies that would embrace people while at the same time advance the core message and vision of the organization. So let's go to the next one, which is transparency. Now, when it comes to transparency, you want to be open, endorse openness. You want to be alertness, because we're dealing with transparency. So while you want to be transparent, you also want to be alert as to what is going on or what can potentially derail a process. And trust but document is important. All right, so let's cover these three in a little more detail. Leaders must nurture a culture that is transparent and promotes integrity and ethics. That's the openness part, as much as promotes synergy and continuity. What about alertness? Well, while embracing transparency, while embracing the openness, a leader must know how to distinguish and discern good motives from bad motives. And finally, when we talk about trust but document, or trust but verify, as the former President Ronald Reagan once said, the use of non-compete agreements, non-disclosure agreements, conflict of interest statements, and confidentiality agreements might be a smart thing to incorporate to keep honor in the honest system. So now let's move on to the next one, which is evangelism. Evangelism. Now, when we talk about evangelism, we're talking about basically three things here: growth and expansion, dealing and working with the Great Commission, and then there are potential flaws, being aware of the potential flaws when it comes to evangelism, or in the private or public sector with recruitment or talent acquisition. So let's look at growth and expansion. Recruitment in the public and private sector is needed to sustain products, services, and the mission. So it is with a ministry or the ecclesia or the ecclesia, the assembly. In order for growth and expansion to take place, there needs to be evangelism. There needs to be outreach. There needs to be a passion for it. There needs to be a cause for it. Just like a company needs the best and the brightest to move and to sustain its functionality and its solvency. So we get to the Great Commission then now, right? Evangelism is the method in which to fulfill the Great Commission. Go ye therefore into all the world, teaching them and having them to observe all things. Then there are the potential flaws that one must be aware of. Here are the potential flaws. Cannibalization. I know that's a hard word, that is eating off each other. Now, when resources for one product is taken away to enhance another product, causing the demise or inefficiency of the adversely affected product. That's cannibalization. That's taking from one to give to the other. We often say robbing Peter to pay Paul. That's like cannibalization. You have a functional process, a functional ministry, or a functional section in a work environment, or a functional vehicle or vehicles. And in order to make one vehicle work, you take parts from that vehicle, from one vehicle, and you give it to another. That happens oftentimes when it comes to leadership. They take the strength of one department and give it to another. That can be a problem. Proselytizing, what does it mean? When a person or a group or a religion is heavily recruited to join another faith or group. And then we have raiding, when the leadership in one entity seizes on the weakness or the vulnerabilities of another organization by taking it over and oftentimes dismantling the weaker entity. So let's go back to the church for a moment with the Great Commission, and let's go to the point of proselytizing. So is it really church growth when members from one church are recruited, paid, and invited to leave their ministry to come join another ministry? Is that real church growth, or is it just shifting chairs? Church growth is when it's about the kingdom of God. It's about the kingdom of God, the expansion of the kingdom. But if people are just shuffling from one place to the next place to the next place, it may seem like growth for one particular ministry, but to the kingdom, there's no growth at all because they were already part of the kingdom. Okay, so let's go on to the next one here. And the next one is discipleship. Discipleship. When we talk about discipleship, we want to think succession planning. Succession planning, build the team, and there are three umbrellas of training that I'll briefly talk about. So let's go to succession planning. Discipleship is a process by which an individual is pursued, trained, and coached into embracing certain values, ideologies, and beliefs of a group or another individual's purpose or cause. Team building need not be limited to gathering in a room and having a facilitator crack jokes and go through a series of obstacle courses and calisthenics. That might be fun. But visiting a museum, taking a city tour, or doing a feeding at a shelter are viable options to build the team. Now, there are three umbrellas of training when it comes to discipleship, because that is what it's about. Discipleship in the public and the private sector, they call it training and development, or education and development. So regardless of the training you do, three things must be done or should be done. One, there should be training in regulatory requirements. Training should include discussion on complying with municipal, federal, state mandates. For example, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, ADA, Age Discrimination in Employment Act, ADA, Americans Disability Act, and there are others. So there should be at least training in regulatory requirements. Number two, there should be training in safety, security, and risk management. Training should include areas related to strategies or workplace violence or hostile intruders and exit strategies for sudden disasters, those things. And finally, there should be some training offered that helps with career development. Training should include opportunities for career and personal development, as well as team building exercises and opportunities. So now we're going to shift to traits of a spirit-led leader or spirit-led leadership. So in the book of Galatians chapter 5, verse 22 and 23, it says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control." That comes from the NIV. So here are what we call soft skills. We may have technical skills and other skills related to our functions in the workplace or in ministry, but then there are these things called soft skills. They are hard to measure, but people bring them. It's hard to teach on them, but it comes almost natural to them. And so here are some soft skills that are really spiritual fruit, but these are the soft skills. One, we have love. Love. Love for the spirit-led leader is having a sense of compassion and empathy that allows him or her to be emotionally moved without forfeiting or compromising the mental strength required to make difficult decisions on how to move forward under difficult conditions. Adversely, a leader who is toxic, bitter, and hateful will create and produce an environment of toxicity because skepticism, mistrust, unhealthy competition, and demoralization will stymie collaboration and productivity. Love is a soft skill. Next, we have joy. Now, for the spirit-led leader is to be upbeat, enthusiastic, positive, to include an ability to motivate others to be the same. People love that. People love joy. Doesn't mean that you have to be unduly giddy, but to be upbeat, joyful. Now, expressions of joy need not always come through charismatic oratorical skills, but a display of meaningful actions that clearly and unambiguously encourages and motivates one to stay positive. But there's more. Peace and forbearance. Let's talk about peace for a moment. For the spirit-led leader is to prefer harmony and unity over strife and contentiousness. A spirit-led leader must be a strong advocate for de-escalating conflict, but proactive in responses quickly to quell conflict should it arise. Another one is forbearance. What is forbearance for a spirit-led leader? It is to exercise an enormous amount of restraint, patience, and poise, not to act or react too hastily with a knee-jerk type reaction to criticism or setbacks. So, firing, terminating, or dismissing people prematurely will create a vacuum and will have others scurrying for cover because they just don't know when the axe is going to fall next. Let's talk about kindness and goodness. For a spirit-led leader is to offer respect before it is earned. Wow, how nice is that? Exercising goodwill, goodness, and kindness is like choosing good over evil, the hard right over the easy wrong, and morality over immorality. Let's talk about faithfulness. For a spirit-led leader is to exhibit an abundance of loyalty and stick-to-itness. Loyalty, be reminded, is on a horizontal, vertical, and lateral scale. It goes up the chain of command as well as down the chain of command. And then we have the last two, gentleness and self-control. For a spirit-led leader is to be sensitive and empathetic to the needs and challenges of others. A spirit-led leader offers a means for followers to seek solace when they are in a temporary emotional state or crisis. Gentleness includes the ability to be flexible and not unduly rigid. And finally, we have self-control. A spirit-led leader is to maintain a consistent level of focus and discipline. A spirit-led leader must evaluate his or her behavior and diligently work towards correcting any flaws. Now, there have been many people in great positions doing great things, from kings to prime ministers to presidents to CEOs and to directors and all the rest, pastors and so forth and so on. And they were derailed because of the lack of self-control. Self-control is very, very important. Now, let's sum this up and talk about the faithful, the foolish, and the fickle. The faithful, foolish, and fickle. We will give you 3 examples now of a person who was faithful when it came to their behavior, a person who was foolish, and a person who was just fickle. You just never know what you're going to get from day to day with this particular person. So let's look at them. The first person I want to bring up is Moses. And I want to put him on the pedestal of being a faithful person when it came to his behavior. Notice now, Moses was responsible for maneuvering Israel out of the untenable conditions of Egypt. This effort's logistical aspect, transportation, maintenance, supplies, sustenance, and all that, wasn't the only challenge for Moses. In the middle of the move, the Egyptian leadership reneged on their promise to let them go, and they launched an offensive against Israel. Israel was ill-equipped to launch a counteroffensive, so Moses had to think quickly on his feet. So, how do we describe Moses? Humble, he was fearless, and he was focused. These are the behavioral traits that Moses exhibited. He was humble, he was fearless, and he was focused. Now, here are 3 quick tips that I want to give you, maybe 4. Leaders should know the capabilities, the limitations, and the hazards associated with their operation. They should also know when and how to improvise. Leaders must not unravel during times of uncertainty, and uncertainty will certainly happen from time to time. Number 3, leaders must be fearless against bullies, antagonists, and narcissistic people, which would invariably result in a hostile or acidic environment. Finally, leaders must be decisive and not hesitant about seeking divine guidance, as Moses did. And God gave him instructions. What is it in your hand, Moses? And Moses took the rod, and we know what happened. He split the sea. So let's move on to the next one. Let's talk about Absalom, because Absalom was just plain foolish. Foolish behavior. So how do we describe Absalom? He was disloyal, he was irreverent, and he was callous. So let's describe some of the events here. Absalom was ruthless and rebelled against his father David. He was on a mission to prove that he was a better and more decisive leader. Still, ambition was not driving Absalom. Mean-spirited bitterness was. Perhaps cockiness and youthful arrogance played a role too. Absalom counted on his popularity, counted on his charisma to sustain him as a leader. But simply that just wasn't enough. But while he had the momentum, he had the resources, and he had the hearts of the people, but guess what? He did not have the favor of God. So let's look at this, and what can we learn from it? Here's some tips. Good leadership, we're talking about behavior, right? Good leadership requires more than launching a charm offensive to win hearts. Good leadership requires more than boastful and vacuous rhetoric to appeal strong. Good leadership requires more than dropping names to appear well connected. Good leadership requires more than a desire to be seen and heard. Even leaders with the best and brightest advisors, as Absalom had, remember Ahithophel, is not enough to compensate for spiritual dullness or character flaws that are unbridgeable. Absalom was just foolish, and his behavior was full on display, or fully on display. So let's cover this last one. Rehoboam. Rehoboam, he was the son of Solomon, actually. And here are his quality traits when it came to his behavior. He was ostentatious, he was overbearing, and he was obnoxious. So let's give you a quick scenario about Rehoboam and how things unraveled for him. When things went off the rail, he derailed himself. Rehoboam was the rightful heir and shoe-in to succeed his father, Solomon. Rehoboam had all the preliminary markings of a wise, discerning, and industrious leader. What should have been an easy layup, to use basketball parlance, his first significant decision was awful. It was a disaster, and guess what? He never recovered from it. Rehoboam invited the elders, and he invited them into a meeting to find out what needs to be done, what they wanted. After the meeting, he invited another group of his friends, younger folks, and he just flipped, and he became belligerent and bombastic toward the elders after meeting with some of his colleagues and the younger people that were associated with him. And he just totally disrespected the advice of the elders. So here's some quick tips. A good leader should be decisive and fair, but not fickle. A good leader will know how to absorb conflicting information and rivalry opinions. So the older elders gave a report and their advice, and the younger came in and gave their advice. A good leader should know how to pick the good from each group and discern and know how to implement what is needed to sustain the legacy, to sustain operations. A good leader will make a judgment that preserves the dignity of those whom they solicited for input or advice. A good leader will not publicly humiliate good people. Why do that? Praise in the open, chastise in private. A good leader knows the importance of allowing allies who offer a counterpoint out of goodwill and respect to save face when there is disagreement. A good leader will. So let's do a recap. We talked about behavior. It is very important for you as a leader to live above reproach, avoid public notoriety, embrace goodwill. Remember P diet. Remember a culture of camaraderie, coaching, discipleship, diversity, growth, evangelism, openness, transparency. Remember the Spirit-led leader embrace the fruit of the Spirit. And finally, learn a lesson from the faithful Moses, the foolish, and the fickle Rehoboam. Stay faithful, stay committed, and stay the course. I say God bless you, and I certainly trust that you received something valuable out of this lesson on behavior and leadership.